Hello, bit of a different video today. Today we're looking at Baile Hoose in Glasgow. For those of you who haven't heard, Baile Hoose is the occupation of the former Hamish Allen Centre, an asylum seekers night shelter in Tradeston. They were set up to offer accommodation to climate justice campaigners during COP26, and today we spoke to two members about the occupation. I hope you enjoy what they had to say.
We're a bunch of autonomous individuals with generally anarchist politics, though can't speak for everybody. We are here occupying a building to provide a need, to meet a need that has been unmet by the state, the council, COP itself, for accommodation for those coming to the conference, because as I'm sure you're aware, there's like a dire lack of accommodation. There's been Indigenous elders sleeping on the streets of Glasgow this week, and if you maintain the idea that the one way to engage in democracy, which I very much question, is to exercise your right to protest at this conference, like I said, which I question, then it is unjust that should only be people that can afford accommodation that are able to exercise that power. So we are in the vision of the world that we want to see, meeting the need for accommodation, using empty buildings to house people and provide people with warmth and shelter in November in Glasgow.
And a space to educate ourselves and a space to educate ourselves and to discuss difficult political questions that we need to work out desperately on, from a ground up level. There's I think I'm gonna go off on a tangent, but maybe you've got specific things that you.
No, go on.
I was just gonna ask, could you speak any more about the sort of the Indigenous elders and stuff, and how you've got in contact with them? Obviously, the ones who've been about accommodation. Here?
There's not any people that are at serious risk of deportation or anyone with unsafe visas. And we really want that to be the case, that people can come, but because since this place has been public for over the last yesterday it went public, the police have just been hounding us, and it hasn't felt safe to invite people in. So we've actually controversially been getting in touch with the council and trying to negotiate actually just having permission to be here for a certain amount of time, so that we can invite people in with unstable visa situations, or kids or whatever, just people that don't want to get arrested.
A safe space to stay, sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it needs to be safe, and it doesn't feel totally safe yet. So at some point it would be really great to invite people, but we're just working it out. Yeah.
I mean, I have something to expand on what you were going into before, is the reason that I said that I don't agree with the idea of democracy, that our only role in that as people is to put pressure on those who hold power in our current global systems, because that is been proved to be an unjust system that has put us in this mess, and is not a system that is in any way fit for purpose to get us out of it. The conference is a way to try and maintain current global hierarchies, and give the illusion to people through media and whatever that they are doing something about the climate crisis that they have caused. Whereas at least my own personal idea of democracy and theory of change about how we can exercise our own power is that the power is not with them in that conference. There's so much more power here in the grassroots, And as I was in Madrid 2 years ago for the last COP, and that was kind of very similarly inspiring to meet activists that had come from all over the world doing with very similar principles and similar ideas about how we can affect change, and to build that community, that genuine international solidarity, by building relationships and learning from each other, which is why we're doing the education. That is how we can build our own power from in a grassroots, bottom-up, democratic way, rather than their democratic way, which is not democratic.
Could you speak a bit more about the education that's going
Um,
So I mean, like, we very early days. We only went public yesterday, so we haven't had a whole lot going on yet. But just gonna.
That's why I was laughing.
Maybe more the education you hope to sort of...
Yeah.
The legacy maybe that you hope to leave.
So, I mean, we're like, the education that we've got in the... is that good? Yeah. Like, mainstream education systems are designed in such a way that is like really difficult to replicate if you're not wanting to replicate the majority of the rest of those systems. So it's like we're trying to learn from other movements like Zapatistas or the revolution in Kurdistan, and we're basically just like totally just stumbling around in the dark, like trying to desperately look for ways of like structuring an education system that actually works, that we can be in control of. And like we're totally I'm just gonna be totally honest, like I feel totally in the dark with it all, but there's so many really amazing examples, like you were saying, the Free Black University. There's loads of examples in the UK of people like having, like doing Saturday schools, or having like real formal informal but formal structures of like education around like anti-colonial understandings of the world. And I guess like specifically we're gonna try and just do a load of workshops and film screenings and discussions and share music and just have a load of like have people coming in and representing minority groups, ideally from other parts of the world, but we're working on that, as we were saying. It's kind of pretty informal at the minute, but what do you think? Got any thoughts?
Yeah, the point on the fact that we don't know what that education looks like, because we are all so indoctrinated by the education system and the media that we are all put through, means that we don't know how. If we knew how to create this world we wanted to see, we'd do it. But the fact is, we've got to. It's got to be a process where we're constantly learning and trying things out, like reflecting and learning from that, and going again, and through that whole time, that's a learning process. That's why like education or liberating education and revolution are synonymous. It's the same thing. So like education has to be at the core of everything we do, particularly as the current narratives that are being pushed, particularly like around the climate crisis, but around kind of any issue, is very much about kind of a divisive politics that splits up our struggles rather than unites them. It's a politics that tells us that the fight for women's liberation is going to be detrimental to the fight for the class struggle, and all of these things are separate, whereas in my opinion one of the biggest strengths we have on the left at the moment is our view of intersectionality that we've built up over the last 40 years particularly, and understanding that the kind of underlying sources of all of our oppression, of all of our struggles, is the same, and that therefore they are the same struggle, and therefore that education cannot come from one person. It cannot, like, we cannot find like the one most oppressed person in the world and ask them how to. It's got to be a process where we're learning together, and understanding the links between our struggles in order to, and understanding the needs within our own communities and our power as a community to meet these needs, and developing those new perspectives and narratives that counter the status quo and what we're told through our traditional education systems.
Could you tell us a bit about how the Scottish state is reacting to your occupation?
Maybe about your experiences with council, trying to talk to them about making this a safe space at the minute. How have they responded to that?
Yeah, but also how like the police responded, or how they've treated you, or how they've like probably, well, I mean, they are on the side of the oppressor. Like that is their role in society.
Got a little thing to say about that. So like, so we sent a message to the council. We sent an email to the council. Like, someone put it together like really eloquently. Someone that had actually previously worked at this building when it was a homeless shelter, and had really strong points about the reasons that we need to use this building, and the reasons that it's absolutely fine for habitation for this like short amount of time, which it absolutely is. Like, this is the finest quality squat I've ever been in. Like, it was so clean, and like it's just completely fine, and like but there's like lots of reasons for trying, like, I guess like he was trying to kind of explain to the council that like we see this as the work that as the work that the organisations in this building were previously trying to do, as like a continuation of that same work. Like, we're trying to house people, we're trying to like make a place safe for like people with that don't have the money to fork out on like ridiculous housing, and like the council got back in touch saying it wasn't they couldn't get the insurance, it wasn't safe, they asked us not to allow anyone to come and like live in the building, stay in the building. Like this building inside is in such good nick. Like, it is just absolutely fine. Like, the fire a couple of people from the fire brigade came in yesterday, and they were saying there's a couple of things we'd like you to do, but other than that, like, the place is fine for like habitation. Like, the fire brigade was saying it's safe. The council are saying it's not. And but
also, despite the councillors have come in, like the local councillors have come in and said that they're happy with what we're doing and they deem it to be safe.
Sorry. And that's good. And like, I think there are like lots of reasons that we don't understand. Like, the council, I mean, I guess like the state doesn't want to promote, especially not in Scotland. The state doesn't want to promote people using empty buildings because it costs money for people that own the empty buildings. But like, ultimately, I think the council were trying to sell this building off anyway. Like, since COVID and since it's shutting down, I think they were actually just like waiting for it to, I don't know if they're waiting for it to rot or what, but they're trying to sell it off. And like, they've got incentive to say that it's not fit for use. And the police are needing some like clarification and confirmation from the council to decide whether they need to kick us out or not. And the police are going to try and kick us out if they can, I guess, because like, it's not in the police's interest to have people squat in empty buildings, and like using free space. So yeah, it's just been like kind of, and also interestingly, like there's been loads of like mainstream news outlets that have come and like been really in support, which is kind of interesting. I haven't really come across that before with things to do with squatting. I guess it's because like it's COP and there's lots of like white middle class people involved, and like yeah. Like
when you say mainstream media, has it been a lot of national, international, regional media?
Glasgow Times and like Channel 4 News and like the Scottish Sun and stuff like that. BBC, yeah.
All of them.
Yeah.
And I mean, another thing on how the police have been treating us. Obviously, like they are trying to build some sort of a relationship with us so that, in my view, we get lulled into a false sense of security potentially, so that they can gather information that might be useful to them when they decide that they want us out.
That's not just a view, that's like an experience, right? That's
yeah.
Evidence of like very many, like a lot of times of that happening.
Yeah, absolutely. That's like, yeah, I've been in so many situations before, and I think a lot of us here probably have, where the police say one thing to kind of give you some false sense of security and to make you feel like they're on your side, but they don't actually, like, their word is nothing. Like, you can't trust a cop. They will ultimately do what they're told, and they will follow orders, and that you can see lots of reasons here that why what we're doing here is in contradiction to what the state wants. And given that the police is a tool of the state, they're like, yeah, I'm not going to trust a thing they say. I mean, like, just earlier today, for example, like just before they came kind of chatting all this niceness to try and make it seem like they were on our side and being really nice, they were not letting anyone in or out of this premises, and they were therefore unlawfully detaining people in here and causing a great deal of harm and distress. And that is, while it's not the most explicit police violence that we see, it is absolutely a form of police and state violence. Similarly, just like the fact that there were 100 cops here earlier, that's very clearly an intimidation tactic, which is again an example of police violence. So it's like they show you they're two-faced. They show you one thing and they come back with another. Like, and it's obviously not in the slightest bit surprising. But yeah, that's how the police deal with things like this.
It was something more specific than this, but like there was the PLOs, the police liaison officers, that came around and were saying quite a different thing as the constables and sergeants across the road, that were being a bit more aggressive, and that's the way that they kind of get you. Like the PLOs come and be all friendly, and that's their job and that's their role, and they try and like they gave us their number yesterday to blue bibs, yeah. They gave us a number yesterday to give to one of the other like constables or sergeants if they came in and tried to be a little bit threatening. It's like as if the constables are gonna like get in touch with the PLOs to say that, oh, it's actually all just sweet, yeah, the PLOs have sorted it. Like it's just like such but there were people like in and around the gates that were actually kind of, it felt like falling for that kind of narrative a bit, and it's just like really important to remember how like trained they are and how like how like purposeful everything that they do, well, sometimes is. Like they also like make a real fucking mess of things sometimes, but yeah, it's just total manipulation. There's something else that I was thinking about, but it might come back to me. Yeah.
I was just going to ask you, you obviously spoke a lot about, earlier you were talking a lot about like community organising and learning from other groups and stuff like that. And I was interested with coming to Glasgow if you find that the city's been good for that, particularly with stuff like, I don't know, I'm not, don't want you to tell me if you're local or anything, because I don't want you to like reveal yourselves or anything. But we had the Kenmure Street sort of direct action last year, where they tried to evict done raids to try and evict to members of the community, and the people of Glasgow turned around and said no, and that was thanks to things like the no evictions network, which obviously has been in touch with you guys today or whatever. So I was just wondering if you could speak to anything about like how you find Glasgow as not just a city for COP, but for a city for other organisation, like things like this as well.
I've had really good first impressions. I'm sure that, this is my first time to the city, and I'm sure that I'm very much within a bubble in this space, but really good first impressions of just like how on it the people that are active seem. But I feel like I'm really not in any place to speak to what is going on in Glasgow because I don't know.
Yeah. From my like very
Should I hand it to someone?
can anyone get this phone call?
Did you get that?
I think so. That would have been good, wouldn't it?
Basically, how have the people of Glasgow supported you in this occupation?
Like really well. Loads of people have come, just like loads of people have just been on call, and I think maybe it's because like there hasn't been a very overtly like. This isn't a particularly like extremely overtly political squat, but it is kind of overt and it's slightly political. But like people have just been, I think it's the first time that this has happened like kind of quite openly in a while. Maybe that's why there's been so much like attention and attraction, but it sounds like it just feels like there's been so much support. There's been so many local groups that have been really interested in helping out, and it feels like in Glasgow there's like, in the scenes that I've been introduced to anyway, it feels like there's a lot more focus on like class stuff and like racialized stuff and like supporting migrants, and it just feels like there's a lot more like grassroots kind of like social based organising, which is just like really it's really amazing to see. Like it's really I get a really good feeling about being here, and people are absolutely fucking amazing. Yeah.
And honestly, can't express how fucking sound everyone is, or like that have been coming across, and that network of radical grassroots groups in any city is where our power lies. And over the next couple of weeks, this is a really important thing to be doing to kind of build those connections and solidarity between the cities. But ultimately we're all going back to where we're doing this work day in, day out, and the people from Glasgow that are involved are going to be carrying on doing that here, and we just hope that this short stint kind of allows all the those grassroots localities to build their own movements further through that building a connection and whatever, because this is so much more than that 2-week fight. And through hearing about what projects are going on in Glasgow, I'm sure that there'll be lots of us that will be inspired by that and take that back to wherever, but at the same time that we could be hearing about things that people are doing in Spain or in Chile or like wherever it is, and these are it's those ways that we can kind of learn from each other that will allow us to build our own kind of bottom-up networks in cities, to hold and recognise and use our power.
So I mean, made me think about thinking about Glasgow is like there's it doesn't again from my like limited experience of like what this kind of scenes are like within the like leftist social movements in Glasgow is like it's not so heavily weighted on climate. It's more kind of like it's more around like people and like and I think that's like a really important thing to recognize, because like a lot of the climate movement is like, I mean, inherently like it's like based on like scientific knowledge that comes from very specific like scientific hierarchies of understandings of the world, and like I think it's really important to like to just like really remind each other that like that is not like we were just talking about this the other day, like we know the issues the issues that we struggle with, like we know the struggles that affect people's lives so deeply, like we know the problems that are like right in front of our eyes. Like we don't need scientists to tell us that there's huge problems. Like it's like, as it happens, like there's like scientific information to say that we're in a fucking absolute crisis, but like there's no one really that I know that knows that actually by like having done the research. Like all the people that I know and all the people that I see around and meet are like people that are like the most kind of affected by that in a way that is like much more visceral, and it's like a much different like understanding. I think it's really important to like hold the emphasis on that, because like although the scientists are coming up with information that's very like that's fucking amazing and like really helpful and really important, it's also like reasonably apolitical, which is not gonna be the thing that will change what is actually happening to the climate or the ecology around us or the people that are like fucked over day in day out. Like
like on that, like that is the reason why we see that not all, but like in comparison with any other leftist social justice movement, I mean not even all climate movements are necessarily leftist, but the climate movement is a lot more privileged, is a lot whiter, is a lot more middle class than any other kind of faction of the overall movement, and I think that's why kind of narratives around the climate crisis that really highlight the links between, for example, the housing crisis and the climate crisis, for example, the food crisis, and like things that people understand, like things that where we're recognizing that there are needs in our communities because we are struggling in this system, under this state, under whatever this is. Like we need to, rather than develop like what you were saying, like rather than like developing it as like it's the climate struggle, we need the narratives that link the climate to the issues that we actually understand. So rather than getting some kind of middle class academic intellectual movement that all works out on paper, but people aren't actually that invested because they're not ready to lose the comforts that they have from living in the UK and in the imperial core, and the the benefits that we all get from that, and the privilege that we all get from that, from like the continuation of colonialism that still persists today, rather than the climate crisis being a symptom of a much deeper rooted issue that is something we can all understand, or at least those of us who experience the violence and the conditions that the state puts us under to keep us in our place. Like it's that we need to be focusing on. It's the inequality that we need to be focusing on, and the climate crisis isn't just going away whether you focus on the climate crisis or whether you focus on whatever. So to depoliticize the climate crisis, which is what is done by the leaders who are in the conference now, which is what is done by the media, that depoliticization is a way to make the visceral reactions from people that are struggling and really understand the true nature of the system that we're living in. It's a way to delegitimize what they're saying, because the science is more important than their lived experience. I feel like I was just reiterating what you were saying,
no,
but with
more clear. Yeah, thanks for that.
What are some of the next steps for the occupation? Without giving like specifics.
I mean, we are an internally focused protest. We are not looking to disrupt what is going on in the rest of the city during the conference. We're not looking to engage in that whatsoever. We're just so more of the same, and with less police presence and kind of more security that could come perhaps via the council, that will enable us to house more people that need it during the conference. That will allow us to bring in people who would otherwise feel who might currently feel unsafe. So trying to make the space feel as safe as possible has got to be our number one priority, given the police presence, and so that we can then just focus on our aims of providing shelter and facilitating education amongst ourselves. It's those are the two aims.
Yeah, and just building more of a culture of deeper communication and understanding of each other's niche and different struggles. To have that education focused around very direct communication, I think is really important, and that's what I want to spend a lot of time trying to work out.
And on that, that highlights perfectly why the education that we're doing in this space. Well, yes, it does partly come from the talks, the films, the workshops, whatever. It comes from people just chatting and building friendships and relationships and community amongst ourselves, so that we can understand each other and learn from each other and learn from our struggles in that way. When we're talking about education, it doesn't need to be that kind of formal idea of education that we're taught, the idea that the state tells us that education finishes when you leave school or college or whatever, is we're always learning from each other. And in spaces like this, what I love being in these sorts of spaces so much is you're constantly learning from such interesting people with such interesting perspectives and experiences, and
Not really, no. I think it's covered pretty much.
You guys got anything else that you're wanting to say?
Just anything you want to put out in the world about.
I mean, one more thing I was saying to someone else earlier, of what this what we're doing here goes what we're doing here goes beyond a protest, because we're not pandering to the power of the state. We are instead recognizing our own power, and we are building that power. We are like from so wait a sec, I assume that's probably into
I never thought we'd have as many chapters and stuff. Build a city for filming.
yeah. For like in anarchist ideology, like the idea of a needs-based society often comes up, and within anarchist groups, like the direct action is a tactic that is frequently used, and also within anarchist spaces, the idea of prefiguration or prefigurative politics of living and acting as if we're like in the image of the world that we want to create. And I feel like this space is something that is doing all of those things. We've recognised a need in terms of accommodation and shelter, a need in terms of education, and a need in terms of community, and we have provided that through direct action, and through providing those needs, we are starting to build that, like a blueprint of that world we want to see. We're not waiting around for someone else to build that for us. We are doing that here through direct action, through trying to understand needs of our communities, and that's like my understanding of what that prefigurative politics is about.
I guess, yeah, I think I just wanted to like give a bit of a tribute to the people that are like we've got this that are, I'm gonna start that again. Yeah, I want to give a bit of tribute to the people that are like really struggling and living and sleeping on the streets, and people that actually really fucking desperately need people that are really desperately need places to stay.
Well troops, I hope you all found that interview as interesting as I did. Thank you so much for watching, and if you do like this kind of content then feel free to subscribe, but thank you for watching and I'll catch you after.